Welcome to a journey through time, where we uncover the story of one of history's most iconic and enigmatic figures, Cleopatra, the last queen of Egypt. In this documentary, we'll explore the twists and turns of her extraordinary life, from her royal birth to her rise to power, her alliances with two of the most powerful men in the Roman world, Julius Caesar and Mark Antony, and the ultimate tragic end that marked the fall of an ancient empire. As we dive into her story, we'll examine Cleopatra's intelligence, her political savvy, and the relationships that defined her reign. Who was she beyond the myths and the movies? How did she navigate the intricate web of love, betrayal, and power? If you're as fascinated by Cleopatra as we are, don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us for this incredible historical journey. Let's begin the story of the queen who would shape the fate of Egypt and leave a legacy that echoes through history. Cleopatra VII, the last Queen of Egypt, was born in 69 BCE into a royal family that had been in power for nearly 3 centuries. The Ptolemaic dynasty, founded by one of Alexander the Great's generals, Ptolemy the Phensota, had ruled Egypt since 305 BCE. However, by Cleopatra's birth, Egypt had lost much of its former glory and power, and its rulers were locked in a constant struggle to maintain control over a kingdom that was increasingly influenced by external forces, particularly the expanding Roman Republic. Cleopatra's full name, Cleopatra Thea Philopata, meant Cleopatra, goddess and beloved of her father. She was the daughter of Ptolemy XIII Auletes, a monarch whose reign was marked by instability, political intrigue, and the constant threat of Roman intervention. Ptolemy V had been crowned pharaoh with the support of Rome, but was far from a popular ruler. His reign was plagued by internal strife, lavish spending, and a reliance on Roman patronage. In fact, Cleopatra's father was so unpopular that at one point he was even exiled from Egypt, forcing Cleopatra's family to flee to Rome for a time. Cleopatra's mother remains a figure of mystery, with most historians agreeing that she was a member of the Ptolemaic dynasty, but little is known about her role in Cleopatra's upbringing. It is often suggested that Cleopatra's father, Ptolemy XIII, played a central role in her education, instilling in her the knowledge of the political intricacies that would define her. Reign. Growing up in the royal court, Cleopatra would have been exposed to the pressures and challenges of ruling Egypt, even as a child. The palace intrigues, court conspiracies, and constant competition for the throne would shape her character, preparing her for the complex world of politics and leadership. Cleopatra's education was extensive, as was customary for royal children in the Ptolemaic dynasty. She was well versed in Greek philosophy, literature and history, and it is said that she was fluent in several languages, including Greek, Egyptian and Aramaic. This linguistic ability was unusual for Ptolemaic rulers, who generally spoke Greek, the language of their Macedonian ancestors, and regarded Egyptian as the language of the common people. Cleopatra's fluency in Egyptian was an important political tool, as it helped her connect with her subjects and present herself as a true heir to the Egyptian throne, rather than a foreign monarch. The political situation in Egypt during Cleopatra's early years was turbulent. The Ptolemaic dynasty had been in a state of decline for decades, and the kingdom was increasingly vulnerable to the growing power of Rome. Cleopatra's father, Ptolemy XIII, had managed to secure his throne through a delicate balance of bribery, alliances, and appeasing Rome, but his reign was far from secure. By the time Cleopatra was in her teens, her father had become increasingly ill and was forced to rely on Roman support to remain in power. In 51 BCE, when Cleopatra was around 18 years old, her father died, and she ascended to the throne alongside her younger brother Ptolemy XIII. However, Cleopatra's brother was only a child at the time, and as a result, Cleopatra became the de facto ruler of Egypt. She had already been groomed for leadership, and her intelligence, charisma, and political savvy were evident. However, her ascent to power was not without challenges. As a woman in a male-dominated world, Cleopatra faced significant hurdles. The Ptolemaic dynasty had long practiced dynastic marriages between siblings, and Cleopatra's marriage to her brother Ptolemy the Thegned was part of this tradition. However, it soon became clear that their relationship was more than just a formality. It was fraught with tension as both siblings sought control of the throne. Cleopatra, ambitious and determined, was not willing to simply be a figurehead. She sought to rule in her own right, which put her at odds with Ptolemy the Thegn's advisors and the court officials who wanted a more compliant monarch. The struggle for power within the royal family was compounded by external pressures, particularly from Rome. At this time, Rome was expanding its influence over Egypt, and the relationship between the two powers was becoming increasingly important. Ptolemy the Thegned had been a loyal ally of Rome, but his death left a power vacuum that the Romans were eager to fill. The Roman Republic, under the leadership of Pompey, had been involved in Egypt's politics for years, and Cleopatra's ascension was no exception. Rome's involvement in Egypt's internal affairs was both a blessing and a curse, as Cleopatra would quickly learn. As Cleopatra's power began to grow, so did the tensions within her court. The rivalry between Cleopatra and her brother Ptolemy the Thegned escalated into a civil war. Cleopatra's supporters were mainly from the elite class, while Ptolemy the Thegned had the backing of the military and the court. The conflict came to a head in 48 BCE, when Cleopatra was forced into exile after a decisive battle with her brother's forces. It seemed like her reign was over, but Cleopatra's story was far from finished. She would soon use her political acumen and personal charm to turn the tide in her favor. In a daring move that would change the course of her life, Cleopatra sought the aid of Julius Caesar, the powerful Roman general. At the time, Caesar was in pursuit of his own political ambitions in Rome, but Cleopatra, ever resourceful, knew that an alliance with Rome could restore her to the throne. She arranged a secret meeting with Caesar, in which she famously had herself smuggled into the palace in a carpet or a sack, depending on the version of the story you believe. Her charm, intelligence, and political acumen impressed Caesar, and he agreed to support her claim to the throne. With Caesar's help, Cleopatra regained her throne, and Ptolemy the Thegned was defeated. Her brother's death, however, was a tragic end to the royal rivalry, and Cleopatra was left to consolidate her power. Cleopatra's return to power marked the beginning of a new chapter in her reign, one that would involve powerful Roman alliances and political maneuvering that would leave an indelible mark on history. As queen, Cleopatra was determined to restore Egypt to its former greatness. Her early years were defined by the struggle for survival both within her family and against external threats. But it was her ability to navigate the dangerous political landscape and her strategic thinking that would make her one of the most famous and influential rulers of all time. Her rise to power was a testament to her resilience, intelligence, and unyielding ambition. In the years to come, Cleopatra's story would become one of love, war, betrayal, and intrigue. But before she could conquer the world, she first had to master the politics of her own court and survive the ever-present threats to her rule. Her journey from a young princess in a kingdom on the brink of collapse to the Queen of Egypt is the beginning of a story that has captivated historians, poets, and filmmakers for centuries. In the wake of her father's death in 51 BCE, Cleopatra's ascension to the throne was anything but smooth. Though she was officially crowned alongside her younger brother Ptolemy the Thegned, Cleopatra's reign was anything but a co-rule. The Ptolemaic tradition dictated that the throne should be shared between siblings, but Cleopatra quickly found herself at odds with her brother's court, where power struggles and rival factions fought for dominance. What followed was a tumultuous and dangerous period for the young queen, marked by intrigue, betrayal, and external influence. The first major challenge to Cleopatra's power came from her brother Ptolemy the Thegned's advisors. While Cleopatra was Highly intelligent and politically astute, her brother was a child, and his lack of maturity made him vulnerable to manipulation by those around him. His advisors, seeking to strengthen their own power, believed that a more compliant monarch, one who would follow their instructions, would better serve their interests. This desire for control led to Cleopatra's eventual exile from Alexandria, as her brother's advisors grew increasingly hostile towards her. For Cleopatra, exile was a bitter pill to swallow, but it would also serve as the catalyst for one of the most famous political alliances in history. Cleopatra's political savvy and her understanding of Rome's growing power were essential to her survival. At the time, Rome was the dominant power in the Mediterranean, and Cleopatra knew that securing Rome's support was the key to regaining her throne. The political machinations in Rome, particularly the rivalry between Pompey and Julius Caesar, provided Cleopatra with an opportunity to make a strategic move. Julius Caesar, the Roman general and statesman, had recently crossed the Rubicon in 49 BCE, declaring civil war against the Roman Senate and setting the stage for his rise to absolute power. As Caesar's forces engaged in a struggle for control of Rome, Cleopatra saw an opening. She knew that an alliance with Caesar would not only help her reclaim the throne, but also strengthen Egypt's position in the face of growing Roman influence. In an audacious move that would forever change the course of her life, Cleopatra sought an audience with Julius Caesar. The meeting between Cleopatra and Caesar is one of the most famous moments in ancient history, steeped in legend and mystery. According to the story, Cleopatra had herself smuggled into Caesar's presence, concealed inside a rolled-up carpet or a linen sack, depending on the version. This dramatic entrance left a lasting impression on Caesar, who was immediately struck by her beauty, intellect, and determination. The meeting marked the beginning of a powerful and complex alliance that would shape the fate of both Egypt and Rome. Cleopatra's charm and intellect were key to winning Caesar's support. In their first meeting, Cleopatra made a compelling case for her right to rule Egypt, emphasizing her deep knowledge of Egyptian history and culture, as well as her strategic vision for the kingdom. But Cleopatra was not merely a political figure. She was a queen with a magnetic presence, a woman who understood the importance of using her charm as a tool in her political arsenal. Cleopatra's allure was not only physical, but intellectual and emotional, and it was this combination that captivated Caesar and laid the foundation for a deep and lasting bond. Caesar, for his part, was captivated by Cleopatra's ambition and her determination to retain Egypt's independence. The political situation in Egypt was ripe for intervention, and Caesar saw an opportunity to expand Rome's influence in the region. He was also impressed by Cleopatra's ability to navigate the treacherous waters of her court, where she had managed to survive attempts to dethrone her. The alliance with Cleopatra was both a personal and political victory for Caesar. By supporting her, Caesar could secure his own influence in Egypt, cement his power in the Mediterranean, and demonstrate his strength as a leader. Cleopatra and Caesar quickly formed a powerful political partnership. Caesar, who was still in the midst of his war against Pompey's supporters, needed Cleopatra's backing in Egypt to consolidate his control over the region. With Caesar's military support, Cleopatra returned to Alexandria in triumph, taking her place as the sole ruler of Egypt. However, Cleopatra's victory was bittersweet. In the process, her brother Ptolemy III was killed in battle, his forces defeated by Caesar's legions. The death of her brother marked the end of the civil conflict within the Ptolemaic dynasty, but it also left Cleopatra as the unchallenged queen of Egypt. With her power secured, Cleopatra set about restoring Egypt's wealth and influence. She was quick to form a political and personal relationship with Caesar, and their union soon became one of the most iconic in history. Cleopatra and Caesar had a son, Caesarion, whom Cleopatra presented as the legitimate heir to the Egyptian throne. This was a bold move, signaling that Cleopatra intended to secure her family's future as rulers of Egypt. The child's birth was a political statement. Cleopatra had not only restored her throne, but had also solidified an alliance with the most powerful man in Rome. While Cleopatra enjoyed the support of Caesar, she also knew that her position was precarious. The political dynamics in Rome were constantly shifting, and Cleopatra understood the danger of becoming too closely tied to a single Roman leader. Nevertheless, Cleopatra was shrewd enough to recognize that Caesar's power could not be ignored, and her relationship with him allowed Egypt to maintain its independence in the face of Roman expansion. The alliance was mutually beneficial, and it provided Cleopatra with the stability she needed to rule Egypt effectively. Caesar, for his part, was not simply motivated by personal affection for Cleopatra. His involvement in Egypt served to bolster his standing in Rome. Egypt, with its vast resources and strategic location, was of immense importance to the Roman Republic. By aligning himself with Cleopatra, Caesar secured a foothold in Egypt that would provide him with both wealth and political influence. Cleopatra, in turn, used her relationship with Caesar to solidify her rule and protect Egypt from the growing power of Rome. However, Cleopatra's relationship with Caesar would not last forever. After Caesar's assassination in 44 BCE, Cleopatra found herself once again facing uncertainty. With Caesar dead, Rome was plunged into a new round of civil conflict. Cleopatra, ever the strategist, quickly turned her attention to Caesar's most prominent supporter, Mark Antony, another powerful Roman general. The relationship between Cleopatra and Mark Antony would become even more significant than her alliance with Caesar, leading to new power struggles and the eventual downfall of both Cleopatra and Antony. Cleopatra's rise to power, fueled by her intelligence, charm, and strategic alliances, demonstrates her incredible political acumen. Her early years were marked by struggle and exile, but her ability to form critical alliances with powerful men such as Julius Caesar laid the groundwork for her reign. Cleopatra's intelligence was her greatest weapon. It allowed her to navigate the treacherous waters of both Egyptian politics and Roman intervention. As a queen, Cleopatra was determined to secure Egypt's future while simultaneously pursuing her own legacy as one of history's most influential rulers. In the years that followed, Cleopatra would face new challenges, both internally and externally, as her relationships with powerful men in Rome grew more complex. But the alliance with Caesar marked the beginning of a new chapter in Cleopatra's life, one that would cement her place in history and ultimately shape the fate of Egypt itself. Cleopatra's relationship with Julius Caesar was not just one of love, but a political alliance that profoundly shaped both Egypt's and Rome's future. Their bond was not a fleeting romance, but a calculated and strategic union that altered the course of history. At the heart of their relationship was Cleopatra's need to regain control over Egypt and Caesar's desire to solidify Roman dominance in the eastern Mediterranean. When Cleopatra first met Caesar in 48 BCE, she was in exile, having been forced out of Alexandria by her brother's advisors, who sought to control the throne. The meeting was a fateful one, as both figures saw in each other an opportunity that could change their respective futures. The legendary nature of their first encounter, when Cleopatra had herself smuggled into Caesar's presence, rolled up in a carpet or sack, remains one of the most iconic moments of their relationship. It was a dramatic move, and it worked. Cleopatra's charisma, intelligence, and political savvy immediately caught Caesar's attention. The young queen knew that her survival depended on securing Rome's support, and she wasted no time in impressing Caesar with her ambition and insight. The relationship between Cleopatra and Caesar was built on a shared understanding of political realities. Cleopatra knew that to maintain Egypt's sovereignty, she would need Roman assistance, and Caesar saw the union as a way to extend his influence into Egypt, which was a vital and wealthy kingdom at the crossroads. of the Mediterranean world. For Cleopatra, the stakes were high. Her brother Ptolemy III had been placed on the throne alongside her, but their shared rule quickly fell apart as Ptolemy's advisors sought to weaken Cleopatra's position. When Caesar entered the picture, Cleopatra's hope for restoring her reign became a reality. Caesar's forces decisively defeated Ptolemy's army, and her brother was killed in the process. With Caesar's military backing, Cleopatra ascended to the throne. As the sole ruler of Egypt, the victory cemented Cleopatra's position, but it was also the beginning of a new phase in her political life, one that would be deeply entangled with Rome. Once back on the throne, Cleopatra's relationship with Caesar became both political and personal. While Cleopatra had secured her rule through Caesar's support, she also understood the value of their personal connection. Her presence in Rome in 46 BCE further solidified the bond. Cleopatra's arrival in the capital of the Roman Republic was a spectacle, a public testament to the strength of her alliance with Caesar. Cleopatra, the Queen of Egypt, had never been to Rome before, and her visit signified not only her personal connection to Caesar, but also her importance in the broader context of Roman affairs. Rome was in the midst of civil conflict, with Caesar's forces fighting to maintain control over the Republic. In this tumultuous environment, Cleopatra's presence added a new layer of complexity to the political landscape. While in Rome, Cleopatra was treated with great pomp and ceremony. She was paraded through the streets in a lavish procession alongside Caesar, showing the public the unity between the two rulers. However, Cleopatra's stay in Rome was not without its tensions. Some Romans viewed her presence as an indication of Caesar's growing power and the threat that he might move from being the leader of the Republic to becoming a monarch. Despite the show of unity, Cleopatra's visit also underscored the reality of Rome's increasing dominance over Egypt. While Cleopatra remained the Queen of Egypt, the political dynamics between the two powers were shifting, and Cleopatra's position was increasingly dependent on her relationship with Caesar. In the summer of 47 BCE, Cleopatra gave birth to a son, whom she named Ptolemy Caesar, but known as Caesarion, meaning Little Caesar. The birth of Caesarion was a highly symbolic event. Cleopatra had not only secured Caesar's help in regaining her throne, but now, through their son, she had a personal connection to the most powerful man in Rome. Caesarion's birth was seen as a political act, meant to solidify Cleopatra's position as a legitimate ruler with a direct link to the Roman leadership. The child was presented as Caesar's heir, a statement that would tie Cleopatra's rule to Caesar's ambitions for the future of Rome. Caesar, for his part, never publicly acknowledged Caesarion as his legitimate heir, despite the clear political message behind the birth. Nonetheless, the presence of Caesarion as Cleopatra's child further strengthened her position in Egypt. If Caesar had recognized his son, it would have been a powerful symbol, linking Egypt directly to the Roman Empire. However, Caesar's focus remained on Rome, and he did not seem inclined to disrupt the status quo of Roman politics by publicly acknowledging an heir born to a foreign queen. The relationship between Caesar and Cleopatra, while personal, was always political, and Caesar's reluctance to fully commit to the legitimacy of Caesarion was indicative of the delicate balance he had to maintain between his personal life and his political ambitions. Despite Caesar's lack of formal recognition of Caesarion, Cleopatra's son was an important political figure. His very existence was a testament to the union between Egypt and Rome. Cleopatra had managed to position herself as both a queen of Egypt and a powerful political ally to Rome. Her relationship with Caesar had ensured her survival, but it also made her a key player in the larger Roman political theatre. However, the political reality of her situation was never far from the surface. While Caesar's personal affection for Cleopatra was evident, the political implications of their alliance were even more significant. The political fallout from Cleopatra's relationship with Caesar was felt in Rome. While many Romans viewed Cleopatra as an exotic and powerful queen, others saw her as a symbol of Caesar's ambitions. The more Caesar allied himself with Cleopatra, the more his enemies in Rome grew concerned about his consolidation of power. Cleopatra's position as Queen of Egypt, combined with her relationship with Caesar, was seen by some as a threat to the Roman Republic. The growing perception that Caesar was becoming too powerful led to increased tension within the Senate. As Caesar's political rivals grew more vocal in their opposition to him, the pressure on him intensified. In 44 BCE, Caesar was assassinated by a group of senators who feared that his power had become too great. His death left Cleopatra in a precarious position. The political alliance that had so effectively restored her rule in Egypt was now shattered. Caesar's death also left Caesarion in a dangerous position, as the Roman senators who had conspired to kill Caesar were unlikely to support the child's legitimacy as a son of Rome. The loss of Caesar's protection meant that Cleopatra would have to find a new political ally to secure Egypt's independence and her son's future. Cleopatra's relationship with Caesar, both personal and political, had defined much of her reign. But with his death, she was forced to once again navigate the complex political landscape of Rome. The death of Caesar marked the end of one chapter in Cleopatra's life and the beginning of another. She was not a queen who would fade into the background. Instead, she would find a new partner in Rome, another powerful general who would play a pivotal role in her future, Mark Antony. Cleopatra's relationship with Julius Caesar was a defining moment in her life and in the history of both Egypt and Rome. It was a union that brought her power, influence, and a son who carried the weight of both Egyptian and Roman legacies. The political and personal dynamics between Cleopatra and Caesar reshaped the course of Mediterranean history, and when Caesar died, it opened the door to a new alliance, one that would take Cleopatra into her next chapter and ultimately define her legacy. Cleopatra's return to Egypt following Julius Caesar's assassination in 44 BCE marked the beginning of a new phase in her reign, one fraught with uncertainty but also rich with opportunity. Caesar's death threw Rome into political chaos, and Cleopatra, ever the astute strategist, recognized that the shifting tides in the Roman Republic presented both a challenge and a chance for Egypt. Without Caesar's protection, her position as queen was vulnerable, and she understood that she needed to find a new ally in Rome to ensure Egypt's sovereignty and her own survival. That ally would come in the form of Mark Antony, one of Rome's most powerful generals who, like Caesar, had ambitions that extended far beyond the borders of Rome. Following Caesar's death, Rome was plunged into turmoil. The power vacuum left by Caesar's assassination saw the rise of competing factions, all vying for control of the Roman world. The most prominent figures in this struggle were Caesar's former allies, Mark Antony, Octavian, the future Augustus, and Lepidus, who formed the second triumvirate to consolidate power and defeat those who had conspired against Caesar. Mark Antony, Caesar's close confidant and general, was one of the leading figures in this new political order, and it was through him that Cleopatra would secure her next powerful alliance. Cleopatra, always aware of the delicate balance between diplomacy and survival, quickly made the decision to align herself with Mark Antony. She had already tasted the advantages of Roman alliance through her relationship with Caesar, and now, with the Roman world in disarray, she sought to ensure that Egypt would not be left vulnerable to Roman expansion. However, Cleopatra's relationship with Antony would not be merely political. It would evolve into one of the most famous and complex personal alliances in history, one that would have far-reaching consequences not only for Egypt, but for the fate of Rome itself. Cleopatra's first meeting with Mark Antony was in 41 BCE, after the formation of the Second Triumvirate. Antony was in the eastern part of the Roman Empire, attempting to solidify his power and secure Roman interests in the region. His decision to travel to Egypt and meet with Cleopatra was strategic, as both rulers recognized the potential for mutual benefit. Antony had the military power of Rome behind him, and Cleopatra had the wealth, resources, and influence of Egypt at her disposal. Together, they could challenge the political forces that were beginning to form in Rome and reshape the power dynamics of the Mediterranean. Their first meeting marked the beginning of a deep and enduring partnership. Antony, like Caesar before him, was captivated by Cleopatra's intelligence, charm, and political savvy. Cleopatra, for her part, saw in Antony not only a potential protector, but also an ambitious and charismatic leader who could help her secure her position in the region. The two shared a vision of power that transcended the borders of their respective kingdoms. Cleopatra understood that Antony's desire to control the eastern provinces of the Roman Empire aligned with her own ambitions to keep Egypt independent while expanding its influence. Their alliance was both a pragmatic political maneuver and the beginning of a personal relationship that would grow stronger over the years. The dynamics of their relationship were shaped by both their political ambitions and their personalities. Cleopatra, ever the calculating strategist, knew how to use her charm and intellect to influence Antony. Her beauty and allure were undeniable, but it was her political acumen and her ability to understand the complex geopolitical landscape that truly fascinated Antony. For Antony, Cleopatra represented a powerful and exotic queen who could offer him the resources and support he needed to strengthen his position within the Roman world. Their personal connection deepened over time, and it wasn't long before the two became lovers, further solidifying their bond. Their relationship, however, was far from simple. Both Cleopatra and Antony had to navigate the complex political and military realities of the time. Antony's alliance with Cleopatra was not without its risks. His connection with the Egyptian queen was viewed with suspicion by many in Rome, where the idea of a Roman general becoming too entangled with a foreign monarch was seen as a threat to Roman supremacy. Antony's critics in Rome argued that his closeness with Cleopatra was evidence of his desire to become a ruler in his own right, one who could rival Augustus, the other dominant figure in Rome at the time. Their relationship fueled Roman fears that Antony was turning his back on the Republic and planning to carve out his own empire in the East. Meanwhile, Cleopatra was determined to maintain her power and protect Egypt's independence in the face of growing Roman influence. She understood the implications of her alliance with Antony, and she knew that Rome was becoming an increasingly powerful force in the Mediterranean. Her goal was not simply to remain a puppet of Rome, as many of the Ptolemaic rulers had been in the past, but to elevate Egypt to a position of strength with its own identity and autonomy. Her relationship with Antony, while deeply personal, was also an expression of this ambition. Through Antony, Cleopatra could secure Egypt's place in the shifting political landscape of the Mediterranean. As Cleopatra and Antony's relationship deepened, so too did their shared ambitions. Together, they envisioned a powerful realm stretching from Egypt through the eastern Mediterranean, encompassing vast territories under their control. Antony's military campaigns in the east, particularly his battles against the Parthians, were part of this broader vision. Cleopatra supported Antony's military endeavors, providing financial backing and troops to aid his campaigns. In return, Antony granted Cleopatra significant territories, such as Cyprus, and promised her a central role in his plans for the future of the Roman world. These political gains strengthened Cleopatra's position and allowed her to maintain control over Egypt, even as she navigated the complex web of Roman politics. However, the growing power of Cleopatra and Antony was met with increasing hostility from Rome. Octavian, the future Augustus, was the most prominent rival to Antony's ambitions, and he saw the alliance between Antony and Cleopatra as a direct challenge to his own power. The conflict between Antony and Octavian would eventually lead to the outbreak of the final war of the Roman Republic in 31 BCE. The Battle of Actium, a decisive naval battle fought off the coast of Greece, was the culmination of this conflict. Antony and Cleopatra's forces were defeated by Octavian's fleet, and the defeat marked the beginning of the end for both of them. In the aftermath of the battle, Cleopatra and Antony's fate was sealed. The loss at Actium severely weakened their position, and both were forced to retreat to Alexandria. With Octavian's forces closing in on them, Cleopatra and Antony made the fateful decision to end their lives rather than be captured. In 30 BCE, Cleopatra and Antony both committed suicide, choosing to die on their own terms rather than face the humiliation of being paraded through the streets of Rome as prisoners. Cleopatra's role in shaping the events of this period cannot be overstated. Her political acumen and strategic alliances, particularly with Caesar and Antony, were key to her ability to maintain Egypt's independence for as long as she did. She was a ruler who understood the intricacies of power, and she knew how to navigate the complex relationship between Rome and Egypt. While her reign was marked by political struggles, it was also defined by her determination to preserve Egypt's autonomy and her vision of a greater Eastern Mediterranean empire. Her relationship with Mark Antony in particular was a significant chapter in her story, one that would ultimately seal her fate and that of Egypt. As Cleopatra's life and reign came to an end, Egypt fell under Roman control, marking the official end of the Ptolemaic dynasty and the ancient kingdom of Egypt. Cleopatra's legacy, however, would live on, not just as the last queen of Egypt, but as a powerful symbol of feminine strength, intelligence, and political savvy. Her alliances with Caesar and Antony reshaped the Mediterranean world and left a lasting mark on history. The alliance between Cleopatra and Mark Antony was one of the most significant political partnerships of the ancient world. Their shared ambitions and complementary strengths created a powerful coalition that posed a direct challenge to the rising power of Octavian, the future Augustus. But their partnership was not just political, it was deeply personal, driven by mutual attraction, ambition, and a shared desire to shape the future of the Eastern Mediterranean. Together, they launched military campaigns, forged alliances, and pursued a vision of power that would forever alter the course of history. However, as time went on, the ambitions of Cleopatra and Antony clashed with the harsh political realities of the time, culminating in the disastrous Battle of Actium, a turning point in their story and in the fate of both Egypt and Rome. Cleopatra's role in Antony's campaigns cannot be understated. She was not merely a queen who offered support from the sidelines, she was a key political and military partner. Antony, a seasoned general with a reputation for military prowess, needed the resources, wealth, and strategic positioning that Cleopatra's Egypt could provide. The alliance between the two was rooted in a shared vision of power, where Cleopatra would play a central role in Antony's plans to reshape the Roman world. In return, Antony promised Cleopatra both political and territorial gains, ensuring that Egypt would maintain its independence while also expanding its influence in the Eastern Mediterranean. Cleopatra's personal involvement in Antony's military campaigns was strategic and significant. In 40 BCE, Cleopatra and Antony jointly planned an ambitious campaign to expand their influence in the East, particularly against the Parthians. This was one of Antony's primary objectives in the region, and Cleopatra's support was crucial to the success of the campaign. Cleopatra's wealth was indispensable in financing Antony's military ventures, and her role in this venture highlighted her importance as a political and military partner. In addition to providing funding, Cleopatra also sent troops, providing crucial support to Antony's forces in battle. This partnership was not simply symbolic. Cleopatra played an active role in shaping the military and political direction of their joint ventures. Antony's campaign against the Parthians, however, ended in failure. The Parthian king, Phraates IV, managed to repel Antony's forces, and the campaign was a significant setback. Despite this, Cleopatra remained a steadfast supporter of Antony. She provided him with diplomatic and material support, even after the defeat. The failure of the Parthian campaign, however, highlighted the difficulties Antony faced as a military leader and the challenges of managing the vast ambitions of both himself and Cleopatra. His failure in the East did little to weaken the bond between him and Cleopatra, but it did force him to shift his focus back to the West, where Rome's political power was more concentrated. The situation in Rome had been shifting as well. While Antony was focused on the East, Octavian, Caesar's adopted son and heir, was consolidating his power in Rome. Octavian's influence grew, and his rivalry with Antony intensified. Octavian, who controlled the Western Roman Empire, was increasingly alarmed by Antony's growing ties to Cleopatra and the wealth and resources that Egypt provided. In Rome, Antony's relationship with Cleopatra was a source of political scandal. Antony, a Roman general, had married Fulvia, but after her death he married Cleopatra, the Queen of Egypt, an act that symbolized his loyalty not to Rome, but to a foreign queen and a foreign power. For many in Rome, this was seen as an affront to Roman values and an indication of Antony's ambitions to create his own kingdom in the East, independent of Rome. The political ramifications of Cleopatra and Antony's relationship were severe. Octavian skillfully used the affair to undermine Antony's credibility, accusing him of betraying Rome in favor of a foreign queen. Octavian's propaganda portrayed Cleopatra as a seductress who had bewitched Antony, leading him to abandon his Roman duties and become an ally of a foreign monarch. This political smear campaign worked effectively in Rome, where the Senate and the people were growing increasingly hostile to Antony. In the face of mounting opposition from Rome, Antony and Cleopatra decided to wage war against Octavian, seeking to decisively end the political rivalry once and for all. The stage for the ultimate clash between the two former allies was set at the Battle of Actium in 31 BCE. The battle was a culmination of years of rising tension between the forces of Antony and Octavian. Antony's fleet, supported by Cleopatra's ships, confronted Octavian's forces near the Ionian coast, off the Greek coast of Actium. The battle was a decisive moment, not only in the history of Rome, but also in the fate of Cleopatra and Egypt. Antony's forces, though numerically superior, were outmaneuvered and decisively defeated. The battle itself was a naval engagement, and Cleopatra's involvement was crucial in the events that unfolded. According to historical accounts, Cleopatra's fleet, along with Antony's, withdrew from the battle in a strategic move, causing confusion and disarray among their forces. Some historians argue that Cleopatra's decision to flee the battle was a tactical retreat, but it was widely seen in Rome as a betrayal, an act that sealed the fate of Antony and Cleopatra's forces. Antony, seeing his forces routed and the tide turning in favor of Octavian, followed Cleopatra's retreat, leaving his soldiers behind. This retreat effectively marked the end of their military efforts to challenge Rome's supremacy. The consequences of the Battle of Actium were devastating for Cleopatra and Antony. Octavian's victory set in motion a series of events that led to the downfall of both leaders. With Antony's forces in retreat and Egypt no longer able to hold off the Roman advance, the Roman Empire's control over the eastern Mediterranean became a foregone conclusion. Antony and Cleopatra's defeat at Actium did not immediately lead to their deaths, but it sealed their fates. They both retreated to Alexandria, where they made their final stand, while Antony's Forces were disintegrating, and Egypt was about to fall under Octavian's control. Cleopatra's role in Eastern Mediterranean politics had effectively ended. In her final moments, she had no choice but to come to terms with the fact that her dreams of a powerful, independent Egypt were fading. The personal and political cost of her alliance with Antony had been monumental. For a time, it seemed that they might succeed in reshaping the Mediterranean world. But in the end, it was Octavian who emerged victorious. Cleopatra's influence on Antony throughout their relationship was undeniable. She had shaped his vision for the future of Rome, helped guide his military strategy, and offered him the resources necessary to challenge Octavian's growing dominance. But despite the depth of their connection and the power that they wielded together, the realities of Roman politics, ambition, and military setbacks proved insurmountable. The battle at Actium, where Cleopatra's retreat contributed to Antony's defeat, demonstrated how even the most powerful alliances could collapse under the weight of political reality. The defeat at Actium was not just a military loss for Cleopatra and Antony, it was a symbol of the shifting tides of history. Cleopatra's role in shaping the events of this period was immense, but in the end, it was Octavian's political savvy and military strength that secured his position as the first emperor of Rome. For Cleopatra and Antony, the political and military realities of their time were unforgiving, and their dream of a new Mediterranean empire came to a tragic end. As Octavian advanced toward Alexandria, Cleopatra's future was sealed. In the final days of her life, she would find herself faced with a choice, one that would end not only her reign, but also the ancient kingdom of Egypt. The personal and political forces that had shaped Cleopatra's reign were now beyond her control, and the collapse of her alliance with Antony was the beginning of the end for both her and Egypt. Cleopatra's final years were marked by personal tragedy, political struggles, and the relentless pressure of Rome's expansion. After the disastrous defeat at the Battle of Actium in 31 BCE, the fate of Cleopatra, her reign and her kingdom seemed inevitable. The once great Queen of Egypt, whose intelligence, charisma, and political savvy had made her one of the most influential figures of the ancient world, found herself facing an unyielding adversary in Octavian, the future Emperor Augustus. As Cleopatra retreated to Alexandria with Mark Antony, her political and military defeat signaled the beginning of the end for Egypt's sovereignty. The final chapter of Cleopatra's life is a story of survival, emotional devastation, and an unrelenting desire to maintain Egypt's independence, even as her kingdom crumbled around her. Cleopatra's relationship with Mark Antony, which had been a powerful political and personal alliance, was irreparably damaged by their defeat at Actium. The loss of their forces meant the loss of any hope of overturning Octavian's growing dominance. The political landscape of the Mediterranean had shifted decisively in favor of Rome, and Cleopatra was now faced with the harsh reality that her kingdom, Egypt, could not withstand the full weight of Roman conquest. Octavian had already consolidated power in the West, and his control over Rome was now unchallenged. He viewed Cleopatra not just as a foreign monarch, but as a threat to Roman supremacy. Her relationship with Antony had been seen as an affront to Rome, and Octavian had used it to turn public opinion against her. But beyond the political implications, Cleopatra's personal life was in turmoil. Her love for Antony, once a source of strength, had become a source of immense emotional and psychological pain. Antony's defeat, his retreat to Alexandria, and his eventual death left Cleopatra emotionally shattered. The man she had loved and fought alongside was now dead, and the loss of their joint ambition, their shared dreams of an empire, left her in a profound state of despair. Antony's death was not only a personal loss, but also the loss of the political ally who had stood beside her in the most critical moments of her reign. With Antony gone, Cleopatra found herself isolated, facing a future where her kingdom was increasingly at risk of being absorbed into the growing Roman Empire. In Alexandria, Cleopatra's focus shifted to the immediate political crisis she faced. Despite the mounting pressure from Octavian, Cleopatra was not willing to surrender Egypt without a fight. She had always been a determined and resourceful leader, and she had a deep love for her country. Egypt had been a proud and powerful kingdom for centuries, and Cleopatra saw herself as its protector. Yet, the odds were overwhelmingly against her. Octavian's forces were already marching toward Alexandria, and Cleopatra knew that the Romans would not hesitate to annex Egypt. To prevent this, Cleopatra sought to negotiate with Octavian, attempting to preserve her throne and Egypt's independence, but her efforts proved to be in vain. In the wake of Antony's death, Cleopatra's final hope lay in her son, Caesarion, whom she had borne with Julius Caesar. Caesarion was Cleopatra's last tie to Rome, the symbolic heir to the Egyptian throne and perhaps the only person who could help her retain her grip on power. Cleopatra had always been politically astute, and she knew that Octavian would never allow Caesarion to live. Caesarion's existence, as the son of Julius Caesar, represented a potential rival to Octavian's claim to supreme power in Rome. As much as Cleopatra longed to see her son ascend to the throne of Egypt, she knew that his survival was increasingly impossible in the face of Octavian's march to victory. The psychological toll of these events was immense on Cleopatra. Her dreams of Egypt remaining independent, her love for Antony, and her hopes for Caesarion's future were all slipping away. She faced a relentless barrage of personal and political crises that must have been overwhelming. Cleopatra had long been a master of diplomacy and political maneuvering, but in the face of Octavian's superior military power and growing influence, even she seemed powerless. Her kingdom, her life's work, was crumbling before her eyes. Despite her deep sense of loss, she was determined to go down fighting, unwilling to submit to Octavian without a final stand. Cleopatra's fate seemed sealed as Octavian's forces closed in on Alexandria. As the situation became more dire, Cleopatra's psychological state deteriorated. The prospect of being paraded through the streets of Rome as a prisoner, an emblem of Roman victory, was a fate that Cleopatra could not bear. Her pride as Egypt's queen, the last in the long line of Ptolemaic rulers, made such a humiliation intolerable. She had spent her entire life building Egypt's power and securing its place in the world, and she would not allow it to fall into the hands of a foreign emperor without a final act of defiance. Her decision to take her own life was not one made lightly. It was a calculated response to the political and personal pressures she faced. Cleopatra understood that her death would not only end her life, but also mark the end of Egypt's independence. The Ptolemaic dynasty, which had ruled Egypt for nearly 300 years, would be overthrown, and Egypt would become a province of the Roman Empire. But Cleopatra, as she had throughout her life, chose to exert control over her own fate. In her final moments, she ensured that her death would not be a passive surrender, but an active choice, a statement of defiance to the empire that had conquered her. Cleopatra's final days in Alexandria were filled with a sense of inevitability. Her emotional state was fragile as she faced the loss of her kingdom, her loved ones, and the dreams she had fought so hard to achieve. She knew that Octavian would not allow her to live. She knew that Caesarion would not survive, but she was determined to go out on her own terms. According to the historical accounts, Cleopatra took her life with the help of 2 loyal attendants. The exact manner of her death is still a matter of debate, but the most widely accepted version is that Cleopatra and her attendants used poison to end their lives. Some historians suggest that Cleopatra's death was the result of a snake bite, while others propose that she may have ingested poison or used a combination of both methods. What is certain is that Cleopatra's death marked the tragic end of an era. Cleopatra's suicide was not simply an act of desperation. It was a final, deliberate choice in a life defined by political struggle and personal loss. In a Her last act, Cleopatra demonstrated her refusal to be humiliated by Rome or by Octavian. She chose to die as a queen, a ruler who had fought for her kingdom's independence until the very end. Her death, however, also symbolized the loss of Egypt's sovereignty. With Cleopatra's passing, Egypt became part of the Roman Empire, its once great civilization relegated to a province under Roman control. Caesarion, her son, was captured and killed shortly after her death, sealing the end of the Ptolemaic dynasty. The loss of Cleopatra was deeply felt throughout the Mediterranean world. She had been a force to be reckoned with, a ruler who had used her intelligence, charm, and political acumen to navigate the treacherous waters of Roman politics. She was a queen who had fought to keep her kingdom free, but in the end, she could not overcome the might of Rome. Cleopatra's death marked the end of Egypt's ancient dynasties and the beginning of a new chapter in Mediterranean history, one that would be defined by the dominance of the Roman Empire. Cleopatra's legacy, however, would live on. Her life, her love for Antony, and her determination to maintain Egypt's independence continue to captivate historians, writers, and artists. She is remembered not just as a queen, but as a symbol of resilience, intelligence, and the indomitable will to fight for what one believes in. Her death was a tragic end to a brilliant reign, but her story remains one of the most compelling in history. The queen who had ruled Egypt with both wisdom and passion became a legend, a timeless figure whose life and death continue to resonate in the collective memory of the world. The death of Cleopatra in 30 BCE marked a decisive moment not just for her, but for the entire Mediterranean world. The fall of Egypt as an independent kingdom was a profound turning point in history. The Ptolemaic dynasty, which had ruled Egypt for nearly 300 years, was brought to an abrupt end, and Egypt was annexed by Rome. In the wake of her death, the political landscape shifted, and the ancient kingdom that had once been a major player in the Mediterranean world was absorbed into the vast Roman Empire. The transition from Egyptian independence to Roman control would shape the region for centuries to come. Cleopatra's passing also meant the loss of any potential future challenges to Roman supremacy in the region. Her son, Caesarion, whom she had hoped would one day take the throne of Egypt, was executed shortly after her death. Caesarion's execution was both a personal tragedy for Cleopatra and a politically strategic move by Octavian. With his death, any claim to the Ptolemaic throne vanished, and Egypt's future was secured as a Roman province. Octavian, soon to become Augustus, had effectively removed the last obstacle to his dominance over the entire Mediterranean world. The immediate consequences of Cleopatra's death were felt not just in Egypt, but across the Roman Empire. Octavian's victory over Cleopatra and Antony gave him the unchallenged power to shape the future of Rome and its territories. His triumph in the East allowed him to consolidate his rule and pave the way for the establishment of the Roman Empire under his reign as Augustus. Cleopatra's death symbolized the final collapse of the Hellenistic kingdoms that had once flourished after Alexander the Great's conquests. Rome now stood as the undisputed power in the Mediterranean, with Egypt firmly under its control. However, Cleopatra's legacy lived on long after her death. Her life and reign continued to captivate the imagination of both the ancient and modern world. As a ruler, Cleopatra had been shrewd, intelligent, and politically astute, using her relationships with powerful men like Julius Caesar and Mark Antony to secure her kingdom's survival. But the romanticized narrative of Cleopatra as a seductress and lover often overshadowed her true political genius. Over the centuries, this image of Cleopatra as a passionate and alluring woman dominated popular culture, obscuring the fact that she was a highly capable ruler in her own right. Throughout history, Cleopatra has been portrayed in a variety of ways. In Roman times, she was often viewed as a foreign queen who posed a threat to Roman power. Her relationships with Julius Caesar and Mark Antony were used to paint her as a manipulative, seductress who used her beauty to influence powerful men. In contrast, later portrayals of Cleopatra, particularly in literature and drama, have often focused on her emotional and romantic qualities, turning her into a tragic figure whose love affairs with Antony and Caesar defined her legacy. Shakespeare's Antony and Cleopatra, 1606–1607, portrayed her as a woman caught between love and politics, a powerful queen whose personal desires led to her undoing. Cleopatra's portrayal in modern media has been similarly shaped by the myths surrounding her life. Elizabeth Taylor's iconic portrayal of the Queen in the 1963 film Cleopatra solidified her image as a glamorous and seductive figure. The film emphasized her relationships with Caesar and Antony, presenting Cleopatra as a woman of extraordinary beauty and charm. While the film was an artistic spectacle, it reduced Cleopatra's multifaceted political and intellectual capabilities, focusing instead on the dramatic aspects of her love life. This image of Cleopatra as a woman whose beauty and sensuality were central to her power has persisted in popular culture, reinforcing the romanticized version of her story. However, Cleopatra's legacy is more than just a tale of love and seduction. Her reign was defined by her efforts to secure Egypt's independence and prosperity in the face of overwhelming Roman power. She understood the importance of strategic alliances, using her relationships with Caesar and Antony to maintain her position as Egypt's ruler. While many historians have acknowledged her intellectual abilities, including her fluency in several languages and her patronage of the arts and sciences, her political genius has often been overshadowed by the more sensational aspects of her life. The true extent of her political acumen, her diplomatic skill, and her leadership abilities have only been fully appreciated in modern times. The loss of Egypt's independence under Roman rule also marked the beginning of a new era for the region. The annexation of Egypt allowed Rome to control the wealth of the kingdom, particularly its grain supply, which was vital for feeding the Roman population. Octavian's victory effectively sealed Rome's dominance over the Mediterranean world, and Egypt became an important province in the growing empire. The cultural and intellectual vibrancy of Alexandria, the city Cleopatra had worked so hard to promote, slowly began to fade as Roman imperial control took hold. However, Cleopatra's influence on the cultural and intellectual life of Egypt and the Mediterranean world during her reign continued to have a lasting impact, even as Egypt transitioned into a Roman province. Despite the political changes that followed her death, Cleopatra's legacy as a symbol of female power and resilience has remained a constant throughout history. As the last queen of Egypt, Cleopatra represented the strength of a once great civilization that struggled to maintain its independence against the tide of Roman expansion. Her reign, though brief and marked by political upheaval, stands as a testament to the endurance of Egypt's ancient traditions. Cleopatra's efforts to keep Egypt a sovereign power in a world dominated by Rome serve as an example of the challenges faced by women in positions of authority and the lengths to which they often had to go to navigate patriarchal systems of power. In modern times, Cleopatra has become a symbol of feminine strength, intelligence, and ambition. Scholars and feminists alike have celebrated her for her ability to wield power in a male-dominated world, challenging traditional narratives of female rulers. While much of her life has been overshadowed by romantic myths, Cleopatra's true legacy as a shrewd political leader and visionary ruler is being increasingly recognized. She is remembered not only for her beauty and her relationships with powerful men, but also for her ability to chart her own path, to fight for her kingdom's survival, and to leave an indelible mark on history. Ultimately, Cleopatra's death signaled the end of Egypt's ancient monarchy, but it also ensured her place in the annals of history. Her legacy continues to inspire countless works of art, literature, and film, and she remains one of the most captivating and enigmatic figures in world history. Though her kingdom fell, Her story lives on, shaping the way we understand the intersections of power, love, and politics. Cleopatra's name has endured for over 2 millennia, and she continues to be celebrated not just as a queen, but as a symbol of strength, intelligence, and the complex forces that shape human history. Cleopatra's death, which marked the end of the Ptolemaic dynasty, ushered in a new chapter for Egypt. One where the rich cultural and political landscape that had defined the kingdom for centuries was now under Roman control. The full, immediate consequences of her passing were swift and irreversible. Egypt, once a great power in the Mediterranean, was now a province of the Roman Empire, and the loss of independence was a bitter pill to swallow for many Egyptians. The political climate was charged with tension as Octavian solidified his reign as the ruler of the Roman world, while Alexandria, the vibrant heart of Egypt, fell under the weight of Roman occupation. In the immediate aftermath of Cleopatra's death, the city of Alexandria, once an intellectual and cultural hub, began to change under Roman rule. The unique fusion of Greek and Egyptian cultures that had flourished during Cleopatra's reign began to fade, replaced by Roman customs and administrative practices. The Egyptian aristocracy, which had long been entwined with the royal family, now found themselves powerless in the face of Roman military dominance. Cleopatra's vision of an Egypt that could navigate the complex world of Rome, while maintaining its own identity, was now gone, replaced by a direct Roman presence that would reshape the region. The loss of Cleopatra's son, Caesarion, was another poignant consequence of her death. Caesarion, her last hope for a dynastic heir, was executed shortly after her passing. The young boy's death symbolized the complete erasure of the Ptolemaic line, leaving no trace of Egypt's once proud monarchy. Caesarion's death was not just a personal tragedy for Cleopatra, but also a political maneuver by Octavian, who saw the boy as a rival to his power. By eliminating him, Octavian ensured that no legitimate claimant to Cleopatra's throne would remain to challenge his control over Egypt. While Cleopatra's reign came to a dramatic end, her legacy was far from over. The memory of her rule lingered in the collective consciousness of both Egypt and Rome. Cleopatra was remembered not just as a beautiful and charismatic queen, but as a figure of immense political intelligence and determination. Her ability to navigate the treacherous waters of Roman politics, her alliances with Julius Caesar and Mark Antony, and her efforts to maintain Egypt's sovereignty left a lasting impact on the ancient world. Even in death, Cleopatra's influence was felt across the Mediterranean as her story became one of the most enduring narratives in history. The image of Cleopatra as a romantic figure, an alluring queen whose relationships with powerful Roman leaders were at the heart of her power, would persist for centuries, often overshadowing her political acumen. In Rome, she was viewed with suspicion as a foreign queen who had captured the hearts of 2 of Rome's most powerful men. But in Egypt, Cleopatra was seen as a symbol of national pride and resilience. Her reign had represented the last vestige of Egypt's independence, and her tragic death marked the end of an era for the kingdom. Over the centuries, Cleopatra's story would be retold in countless works of literature, drama, and art. From Shakespeare's Antony and Cleopatra to modern Hollywood films, Cleopatra became a symbol of both political power and romantic tragedy. Her allure as a woman who wielded power and influence in a male-dominated world continues to fascinate people to this day. However, the reality of her reign was far more complex than the romanticized image that emerged in the centuries following her death. Cleopatra was not simply a lover of powerful men. She was a ruler who understood the importance of alliances, diplomacy, and strategic thinking. She was a woman who used her intellect and charm to secure Egypt's place in a rapidly changing world, and her ability to navigate the complex political landscape of Rome is a testament to her skill as a ruler. Cleopatra's legacy has been shaped by the lens through which history has viewed her. In the ancient world, she was seen as a powerful, sometimes controversial ruler who had the ability to bend the political currents of her time to her will. In modern times, she is often viewed as a tragic and romantic figure whose life was defined by her relationships with two of Rome's most powerful men. Yet her true legacy lies in her ability to challenge the established norms of her time, to assert her authority as a woman in a patriarchal world, and to fight for her kingdom's survival against the overwhelming might of Rome. Her death, which brought about the final conquest of Egypt by Rome, ultimately set the stage for the rise of the Roman Empire. Octavian's victory over Antony and Cleopatra was a pivotal moment in Roman history, paving the way for his consolidation of power and the establishment of the Roman Empire under his rule as Augustus. The annexation of Egypt was a significant blow to the remaining vestiges of the Hellenistic world, and Cleopatra's passing marked the definitive end of the Ptolemaic dynasty. With her death, Egypt became irrevocably Romanized, and its rich cultural heritage began to be subsumed by the greater Roman world. Despite the fact that Cleopatra's reign ended with the fall of Egypt, her story continues to resonate with people around the world. She remains one of history's most compelling figures, a woman who defied the odds, fought for her kingdom, and carved out a place in the annals of history that would ensure her lasting legacy. Her intelligence, her beauty, her charisma, and her political savvy have made her a symbol of power and resilience, a testament to the complexity of a woman who rose to the highest echelons of power in a world dominated by men. As Egypt's last queen, Cleopatra's influence on history cannot be overstated. She left behind a legacy that transcended her own lifetime, shaping the cultural and political landscape of the ancient world. Whether as a ruler, a lover, or a symbol of defiance, Cleopatra's life and death continue to inspire and captivate audiences today. Her reign, her triumphs, and her ultimate downfall reflect the fragility of power in a world where political fortunes could change in an instant. But her place in history as one of the most extraordinary women ever to rule a kingdom is assured. Cleopatra's life and legacy have left an indelible mark on both the ancient and modern worlds. As the last queen of Egypt, her story was one of resilience, intelligence, and political acumen. Though her reign was short and ultimately ended in tragedy, the lessons we can learn from her life continue to resonate through history. Cleopatra was not only a ruler who fiercely fought for her kingdom's independence, but also a symbol of power, intellect, and beauty, a woman who defied the conventions of her time to stand as one of the most complex and iconic figures in world history. Cleopatra's political genius is one of the most enduring aspects of her legacy. Throughout her reign, she faced overwhelming challenges from both internal rivals and the external pressure of Roman expansion. Her ability to maintain Egypt's sovereignty amidst the rise of Rome is a testament to her strategic brilliance. The alliances she formed with two of Rome's most powerful men, Julius Caesar and Mark Antony, were not driven by mere passion, but by her shrewd understanding of the geopolitical landscape. These alliances were central to her survival and the survival of Egypt, and Cleopatra's ability to use her relationships with these men to her advantage demonstrates her extraordinary diplomatic skills. Despite the eventual failure of her efforts to secure Egypt's independence, Cleopatra's political maneuvering ensured that she remained a formidable force in the ancient world. Her reign was also marked by her intellectual prowess. Cleopatra was not only a political figure, but also a scholar, fluent in several languages and well-versed in philosophy, science, and the arts. She brought a unique blend of Greek and Egyptian culture to her rule, positioning herself as both a traditional pharaoh and a modern Mediterranean leader. Cleopatra's patronage of intellectual pursuits and her deep understanding of governance allowed her to make informed decisions that benefited her people. Her reign represented a rare intersection of intellectualism and power, two traits that are often overlooked in depictions of her as merely a seductive queen. Over the centuries, Cleopatra has been transformed into a symbol of both feminine power and tragic romance. Her portrayal as a beautiful seductress, often depicted in literature and art as a woman who used her charm to manipulate powerful men, has overshadowed the more complex aspects of her reign. In truth, Cleopatra's beauty was only one facet of her persona. Her true strength lay in her intellect, her political savvy, and her ability to navigate the complex and dangerous world of Roman politics. The belle, romanticized image of Cleopatra as a lover of Caesar and Antony, while compelling, often obscures the more significant contributions she made to her kingdom's survival and her people's welfare. This reduction of Cleopatra's life to mere romantic entanglements has been perpetuated in works of art, literature, and film. Shakespeare's Antony and Cleopatra presented her as a tragic figure, torn between love and duty, while the 1963 film Cleopatra, starring Elizabeth Taylor, cast her as a glamorous and seductive figure, focusing on her relationships with Caesar and Antony. These portrayals, though captivating, have contributed to a misunderstanding of Cleopatra as simply a woman whose beauty and allure were her primary sources of power. In reality, Cleopatra's influence was far more substantial, rooted in her leadership and her unwavering commitment to the preservation of her kingdom. Cleopatra's death marked the end of an era for Egypt, the fall of the Ptolemaic dynasty and the annexation of Egypt by Rome signaled the end of Egyptian independence, yet her death did not erase her legacy. In fact, it solidified her place in history as a symbol of resistance. Instead of submitting to the Roman conqueror Octavian, she chose to end her life on her own terms, refusing to be paraded as a captive. This final act of defiance ensured that Cleopatra would be remembered as a figure of strength and autonomy, not simply as a woman who was defeated by the overwhelming power of Rome. Her legacy, however, is far from one of mere defiance. Cleopatra's story is also a reflection of her enduring influence on both Egypt and the wider Mediterranean world. She remains a symbol of feminine strength, intelligence, and ambition, serving as an inspiration for generations of women who seek to challenge the norms of their time and assert their place in history. Her ability to lead in a world dominated by men, to command armies, and to negotiate with the most powerful figures of her day has made her an enduring figure in discussions of female leadership. Cleopatra's life reminds us that women, even in the most challenging of circumstances, can rise to power and leave a lasting imprint on history. In modern times, Cleopatra's image has evolved. No longer confined to the role of the romantic heroine, she is now increasingly seen as a multifaceted ruler whose intellectual and political skills were central to her success. Historians and feminists alike have come to recognize her as a visionary leader, a woman who understood the complexities of politics and used her resources wisely to secure her kingdom's place in the world. Her portrayal as a seductress is now being re-examined as a more nuanced understanding of her political role and personal agency continues to take shape. Cleopatra's place in history is assured, not just as a queen who once ruled over one of the most powerful kingdoms of the ancient world, but as a symbol of resilience, intelligence, and leadership. Her legacy is one of resistance against overwhelming odds, a reminder that power is not merely a product of strength or beauty, but of intelligence, strategy, and determination. Cleopatra's life teaches us that true leadership requires not only the ability to navigate the challenges of the present, but also the vision to shape the future. In the end, Cleopatra's story is one of complexity. She was a ruler, a lover, a scholar, and a leader who lived through a time of immense political upheaval. Yet, despite the loss of Egypt's independence, her legacy endures. she remains one of the most captivating figures in history. Her beauty, her intellect, and her unyielding determination to preserve her kingdom and her people still resonate with us today. Cleopatra's life continues to inspire and challenge us, reminding us that the true measure of a leader is not only their ability to rule, but their capacity to leave a lasting legacy, one that transcends the boundaries of time and place. Cleopatra's life and death have been surrounded by a wealth of myths, legends, and historical debates that continue to shape the way we view her today. As the last queen of Egypt, her reign was not just a moment in history, it was a pivotal turning point that has continued to captivate people's imaginations for centuries. Her legacy, though clouded by romanticized perceptions, is rooted in her political brilliance, her strategic alliances, and her unyielding fight to preserve Egypt's independence. The myths surrounding her beauty and her relationships with powerful men like Julius Caesar and Mark Antony have often overshadowed the more complex and powerful aspects of her reign. The image of Cleopatra as a seductress, alluring and irresistible, has long been cemented in popular culture. Writers like Plutarch and later Roman historians painted her as a woman whose beauty alone gave her power over mighty men. In modern times, this portrayal reached its peak with Elizabeth Taylor's iconic role in the 1963 film Cleopatra, where she was depicted as a glamorous, passionate woman of unparalleled beauty. While such portrayals have contributed to her lasting fame, they have also obscured the deeper political and intellectual qualities that defined her leadership. The allure of Cleopatra's beauty has often overshadowed the fact that she was a ruler who governed with remarkable intelligence, strength, and strategic thinking. In truth, Cleopatra's power was never simply a matter of physical attraction. Her reign was marked by her exceptional political acumen, her ability to navigate the treacherous waters of Roman politics, and her skilled manipulation of alliances to protect her kingdom. She understood the stakes of her position in a world dominated by male rulers, and her decisions were always calculated to safeguard Egypt's sovereignty. The alliances she formed with Julius Caesar and later with Mark Antony were not acts of romantic passion alone. They were pragmatic moves aimed at securing her throne and ensuring Egypt's survival as an independent nation in the face of Roman expansion. Cleopatra was a leader who used every resource at her disposal to defend her people and her legacy. Yet, despite the brilliance of her rule, much of Cleopatra's story has been overshadowed by the focus on her personal relationships and the romanticized myths surrounding her life. These myths often reduce her to little more than a tragic queen caught in the vortex of love and war. The idea of Cleopatra as a seductress has shaped her image for centuries, leaving little room for recognition of her as a skilled ruler in her own right. While her relationships with Caesar and Antony were significant, they were also part of a larger political strategy aimed at securing Egypt's future. Cleopatra was not merely a woman who used her charm to win over powerful men. She was a leader who understood the intricacies of statecraft and diplomacy. In many ways, Cleopatra's reign can be seen as a reflection of the complexities of leadership in a world that was not only politically turbulent, but also fiercely patriarchal. As a female ruler, Cleopatra had to navigate not only the internal challenges of governing Egypt, but also the external pressures from the growing power of Rome. Her ability to maintain Egypt's independence for as long as she did is a testament to her strategic genius. Despite her ultimate defeat and the annexation of Egypt by Rome, Cleopatra never surrendered. Her death in 30 BCE, rather than marking the end of her influence, became the moment in which her legacy was cemented as one of resistance. Rather than being paraded through Rome in chains, Cleopatra chose to end her life on her own terms, a final act of defiance that ensured her place in history. Her death brought the Ptolemaic dynasty to a close and marked the end of an independent Egypt. But Cleopatra's legacy lived on in the stories, myths, and art that followed. Her image has continued to evolve through the ages. In literature, she became a tragic figure, caught between love and duty. In modern portrayals, she has been reimagined as both a seductress and a visionary queen, a figure who defied the norms of her time. These depictions, while adding to her mystique, have also obscured the true complexity of her character. Cleopatra was not only a lover, but a brilliant politician, a mother, and a ruler who fought against the overwhelming power of Rome to the very end. The enduring fascination with Cleopatra reflects the lasting impact of her story on culture, politics, and history. She has become a symbol of female power, resilience, and intelligence. In a world where women were often sidelined from positions of power, Cleopatra stood as an example of what a woman could achieve in the face of immense adversity. Her political maneuvering, intellectual prowess, and fierce determination to protect her kingdom have made her a lasting figure of inspiration for generations of women in leadership. Cleopatra broke the mold of what was expected of female rulers and created a legacy that endures as an icon of strength and strategic brilliance. Cleopatra's legacy has also sparked important discussions about gender and power. Her story raises questions about how women in power are perceived and the challenges they face in a world dominated by male authority. Cleopatra's rule challenges the traditional narratives that often dismiss female leaders as mere pawns in political games, showing that women can be just as capable, intelligent, and resilient as their male counterparts. Her life and reign serve as a reminder that leadership is not determined by gender, but by intelligence, determination, and the ability to navigate complex political landscapes. In the modern world, Cleopatra's name continues to echo. From Shakespeare's play Antony and Cleopatra to countless films, books, and academic studies, her story remains one of the most captivating in history. Yet, the image of Cleopatra that we have inherited is not just one of beauty and romance. It is also one of a fierce, determined leader who fought for her people and her kingdom against overwhelming odds. Her political legacy, intellectual contributions, and ability to navigate the dangers of Roman politics ensure that Cleopatra's name will be remembered, not just as the last queen of Egypt, but as a symbol of the resilience of the human spirit in the face of adversity. Cleopatra's death may have marked the end of Egypt's independence, but it also ensured her place as one of the most iconic figures in world history. Her legacy is not simply the result of her beauty or her relationships with powerful men. It is rooted in her political brilliance, her strength as a leader, and her enduring influence on both Egypt and the Mediterranean world. As a ruler, Cleopatra proved that intelligence, resilience, and determination can transcend even the most formidable challenges. Her story will continue to inspire and challenge us, raising questions about power, legacy, and the complexities of leadership in a world that is always shifting.